वेट, हम लिंक आती है उधर, यही है ना लिंक?
से निकाल ले।
लेट्स ट्राई। ज्वाइनिंग थ्रू ट्रिपल ई आईडी। अरे, जिसको इनवाइट करा है वो अलग।
Okay, so hello all. We all are pleased to invite you to the inauguration of Opencode'24, IIIT Allahabad's flagship open source development event. To outline in brief about this year's edition of Opencode, we have numerous repositories in various domains and tech stacks in which you can contribute. Meticulously planned for newbies and seasoned experts alike, there will be multiple issues in each repo concerning different features and bugs. To contribute, you must first register on Unstop and the Geekhaven events portal and head straight to the OpenCode IIIT org on GitHub, where issues will be made live right from tonight. There will also be events other than concerned with open source development, like CTFs and coding contests. So, beginning today's session, we have Mr. Shivam with us to guide us on a technical journey. Mr. Shivam, an engineering architect at ZS Associates Pune, is an AI expert specializing in knowledge graphs, generative AI, LLMs, and computer vision. Recognized among the top 20 emerging leaders under 30 by the IEEE Computer Society, he has delivered 50 plus keynotes globally and led 30 plus impactful AI projects in pharma and enterprise systems. An active academic and leader, Shivam sir teaches AI at NordCap, Manipal, and SRM universities, chairs initiatives at the IEEE Computer Society, and serves as an advisor to IIIT Allahabad and Saptashi. With 15 plus research publications, he continues to drive innovation in AI. Over to you, sir.
Hey, Shah, thanks for that introduction. And really looking forward. This is like when we talk about open source community, this is a very big thing. Like even in industry, we do use it. So looking forward this for this month-long event and seeing how it proceeds. So
Recognized
happy
among
to
the top
contribute.
20 emerging leaders under 30 by the
Yep.
IEEE Computer Society, he has delivered 50 plus keynotes globally and led 30 plus impactful. Alright, sir. So, we would like to have a few general queries regarding AI and open source discussed with you. Will you be ready, sir? Chairs
Yep. Yep.
initiatives at the
Perfect.
IEEE Computer
Let's start that.
Society and serves as an advisor to IIIT Allahabad and Saptashi. Alright, sir. So, what are the benefits of contributing to open source projects for individual developers and organizations?
Okay. Perfect. So let's take this question in two aspects, right? When we talk about let's start with organizations and then I'll go to the individual developers. So I'm like I'll explain you with an example. So when we talk about open source development, right? Like recently with all this, because I come from an AI background, I wanted to just tell that like when we started like this journey, there was like multiple packages like Llama Index, LangChain, and all of those things which started coming in Python, right? Like when we started developing, like I think last years. Now, while we started deep diving in all of those, and initially it was just OpenAI model, right? Like which was there. So and eventually we started seeing like a lot of new like models and enterprise ready models by AWS, like in terms of Bedrock, and recently Nova's like so because LangChain was like developed first of all, right? Like it was very useful for initial prototyping and creating these AI agents. And it uses it can be plugged with multiple like any of these large language models. But a framework like LangChain being developed by open source community, that itself was like really huge. And it was the code was also like open source, and like a lot of people started using it, like contributing it. And that is one of the reason that code like that particular framework has come way long. Now, when we talk about organizations, what I noticed, like, and this is very recent, right? We are working with a lot of like this enterprise teams, right? So the entire LangChain code was written initially keeping in mind only the OpenAI construct. So when I say OpenAI construct, what I mean, like, it was really just written that like you are an assistant which is trained on OpenAI model in a prompt, right? Now, in the prompt, if it is specifically mentioned OpenAI model first, right? It will start thinking like that way, and because you're not, and even the in prompt engineering, the way you write the prompts actually depends a lot on your model which is there. Like if you are using something like a Claude 3.5, the way you need to write the prompt is little different from what you want. You write a prompt for a chat GPT, OpenAI like GPT-4 or something, right? So because LangChain was developed within this OpenAI framework, taking OpenAI framework as a like starting point, all the packages and open source community also developed in that similar way. Now, when Bedrock and like Databricks and all of those kind of things started coming, organizations like who were using their product, they started seeing that problem and they reported, I think, to AWS. And AWS now, imagine AWS itself is a such a huge like organization, right? They have started using like they have started creating like a LangChain package equivalent for Bedrock, or LangChain package equivalent for like even database has started doing that. So if you start seeing the aspect that even organizations, because the open source framework became so popular and everyone started adopting it, like enterprises didn't have a chance. Like instead of thinking about it and slowing down, like the team started seeing that, hey, how can I contribute so that my like products gets used. So that is how for corporates or enterprise, like especially when we talk about cloud power, like cloud vendors, like this kind of thing is helping, right? Like where open source, like they have to contribute and it becomes a mandate for them, right? Now for individuals, learning, right? Like one of the important, there are many benefits, but one thing which I feel like, which like we get very easily in open source, like, and we is that learning. Imagine like you had certain like, so everyone had collab and all of those, but someone when these large language models came new, right? So if you see what was like OpenAI APIs still required certain dollars, right? And just imagine, right? Like, not every one of us are rich, right? We will think about like investing anywhere before. So that is where this aspect, right? It's democratizing. Open source codes not only helps in your for enterprises, but also it democratizes the learning. It makes it what we really talk about diversity and inclusion, right? Actually, this is the open source community helps in diversity and inclusion and making sure that it reaches like whoever is interested can then come and code, right? It democratizes that need for everyone. Like whatever code you want to do, like if there is someone who's poor coming from a poor background, he can also use these packages, right? It is just free. So that is what I feel like is from an individual level also, like you don't need like really hard money to earn, like hard money to learn, right? Definitely you earn like using these packages, but you don't want to like because open source is there, you can learn very easily, I'll say. So that is another aspect from an individual perspective which I wanted to highlight. So you can see, right, the difference, like both of them is required and it helps for both enterprise as well as individuals.
Sir, can you talk on an experience where you have leveraged some open source technology or contribution yourself?
There are multiple places actually. Like so, like LangChain and LangGraph is one example where we do use it for multiple projects within our own system. So that is one. But like, okay, again, the notion of open source technology, it's not only about code, and that is what I wanted to talk when you ask that question, right? Like, so open source can be anything, right? The research papers which are publicly accessible, that itself is a open source contribution. When we talk about like these code pieces or frameworks, that is an open source contribution. Then there are data, which is an open source contribution. Then there is a concept of ontology. I don't know how you know that, like if you know that, but like in because I come from a pharma domain, right? Like so there are a lot of organizations who are working on open source ontology. And ontology is nothing but just you can imagine like for in naive terms, you can mapping that business, right? Like into a graphical, like knowledge graph kind of structure. Now we in a lot of projects we have just leveraged those open source ontologies to empower decisions in pharma. So like how do you like okay, so just imagine, right? Like I like all the disease areas. There are so many disease areas, right? Even when you talk about cancer, within cancer there can be lung cancer, there can be breast cancer, and all of these have different characteristics and traits, right? To capture those features about lung cancer and breast cancer at that granular level, like only a expert in oncology can tell you that, and not everyone. So even if you have to model any business sense, so that is where ontology comes in. And I have been leveraging these ontologies for multiple projects within like my company and even for a lot of my clients. So that is one. So when we talk about open source contributions or open source usage, we should not only restrict ourselves to just code. that okay, it's only about the code piece. It's not. It's also about these constructs, right? Because technology is not merely just code. It's more than that. And when we talk about ontologies and all of those, that's where it comes into the picture.
So you have been quite vocal about green computing and related technologies. So can you give some example on how does open source tech enhance sustainability and environmental security?
Okay. Yep, definitely. And that's a very good question, by the way. So when we talk about, just giving an example, right? Like, again, so if you suppose you want to like stitch a cloth, right? Will you use like a sword or a needle can work?
A needle, definitely.
Yep. So now, similarly, if you're going to a war, you definitely need a sword with you. So if you see like horses for courses, and that is what I talk when I talk about sustainability and green computing. So a lot of when we talk about these AI models also, right? There's so many models which have been like trained on some specific data source. Like let's say on a medical data, someone has trained a small language model. So for something like that, we don't have to use every time OpenAI or something. And there are so many open source small language models which are like I'll say better than uh, like these even OpenAI and all in certain context, because people have been tuned, like they have been tuning that and training that only for that particular specific purpose. And that is where I see like if you talk about like using smart now, why I'm bringing this concept of small language model and large language model together, right? Because if you see now when we talk about environmental security and sustainability, the amount of like consumption, like both energy consumption and water consumption, which happens using large language model is huge. Now, do you want to consume energy where it is not required? Not really, right? You don't want to switch your fans on and when you're not there in the room. Similarly, it's when you have like techniques, just use a small language model where it is actually required rather than using a large language model and consuming more energy. So in that sense, like that is one aspect where like I've seen like a lot of energy saved and as well as a lot of money saved, right, for clients. So it's both sustainable as well as it's more greener when we, so that's where I feel open source community again, right, like bringing these small language models, making it open source so that people can use it effectively is itself like a great thing.
So you being extensively involved in the field of AI, sir. So can you tell us what are the recent trends in open source development, such as AI assisted tools or distributed systems?
Yep, sure. So like when I talk about like AI recently, right, I think you would have also heard about like these agentic frameworks and all of those kind of things, right? Now what is these agents? So the recent trends have always been like, okay, people are going towards those autonomous agents where you give a task to an agent, it will automatically find out, do some research, plan something and get a result out for you, right? Now to develop such agents, there are so many frameworks which people have started developing on artificial intelligence. Like, so one of these like multi-agent framework is LangGraph, which is like really based on like, so it's just connecting multiple agents together and making them do like an end-to-end task, right? So that is one of the recent development which I'll say, which is a highlight. Like, so LangGraph is just like one such example, but there are a lot of such things which are coming on a multi-agent system and making autonomous agents. So like what you will see, and you would have started seeing like all of these, like, so you'll have a call center agent, you will have a software development agent, which will assist, like it will be human centric, right? It will assist humans to develop the codes faster and better. So that's how it will.
All right, sir. And what is the importance of open data sets in AI, and how do they complement open source code bases?
Your entire OpenAI is trained on your open data sets. So you can understand the usage. I'm not sure on like did they train on anything else also, but I'm sure that they used all the open source data sets which are available. So like a lot of these training of like large language models, or even historically training of machine learning algorithms, or even doing some research, right, requires data set, like because data is the foundation. And that is where I feel like while developing or doing these testing even, right, like let's say you develop some like framework in an open source, or you develop some code piece, but you do have to test somewhere, right? So that is one aspect, one place where I definitely need these open source data sets. Like you need to So one very good suggestion for the open source community is don't just think about the frameworks alone. Think about the problem statement also, what it will solve. And that is exactly where the data will come in. So you can stitch the real problem statement with the framework which you are developing to make it more usable. You don't want to just develop something in open source and leave it, right? You want people to use it. And why will people use it? People will only use it if they find that it's valuable in solving one of my business use cases, right? So that is where I feel like to solve these practical business use cases, the data becomes very important. And to have that, that is where open source data, because data is very, it's more costly, I'll say, than the framework. So data is very costly. So that is where if we have something open source data, it's like huge.
Yeah, so data can be thought of like fuel for the model, right?
Exactly.
Thank you, sir. It's just some general queries regarding open source. What are the risks of integrating open source software with proprietary systems?
Okay. So see, there are multiple risks when I talk about like these risks. So definitely there'll be licensing risk, legal risk, and all of those. But for an enterprise or a proprietary software, I'll tell you, right? Like few other things which like is very, very important. And so when you bring an open source model, one is operation, right? When you have like a, let's say when you go to a person and you say, hey, you have something on AWS and it's managed by AWS. So you have a person to catch. Now, when you say that, okay, I'm using an open source, whom will you catch if it doesn't work? You'll have to post it in open source community, correct? So
Yes.
enterprises cannot directly rely on open source codes, right? Like unless there is a person or a organization who can take up that responsibility. So that is one aspect where I feel like we should be like, while we are developing open source code, we should also think that, okay, if you really want enterprise to like, so we need to have a support model, we need to think about all of those aspects. So that is one definite risk I see in open source development. Other set of risks, like I said, right, like this dependency and all, like, so when you're deploying these open source models, right, so it is dependent on some other package, and somewhere something changes or breaks. How to fix it? And suppose that by that time that open source community has shut down, so like people can get trapped, like especially enterprise can get trapped if they start using that like without any. So that is another very big risk which we see in the industry, right? So to integrate any of these, then definitely licensing and all is there. So licensing is one of the major issues. Like, so suppose if you don't read the license properly, and like suppose it's a GPL license, right, where you really want to like copy left kind of license, where you want to bring that back to the open source software, you'll have to contribute. That is where, again, if something is a GPL license, it's very difficult to use for a like product which is for a company, right? Because you'll have to like reshare the code and all of those kind of things. So that licensing aspect is there in mind. So these are few which I see. There are many others like in mind.
So how do you decide which license to use for an open source project?
Again, there are there are multiple ways you can take the decision, but like one way can be just like simple way, I'll say, is like based on use case, right? If your use case is widespread, like let's say you want more and more people to contribute, and like you don't have anything, so that is where a license like MIT or Apache can make sense, right? Because they don't have like strict boundaries. Now suppose if your use case is, no, I want them to come back, right, and contribute back to my whatever changes they are making to my source code, like they should come back, and so that is where like a license like GPL, right, JNU license, which we say, like that kind of license come into the picture. I think there's again, the third aspect can be commercialization. So suppose if you want to commercialize like long term, right, like if you want to really commercialize, so that is where you need to be more stricter with the license. So definitely based on your use case and your understanding, you can think about licensing and aspects.
Thanks a lot, sir. Now we'd like to have a light Q&A session so our viewers can also get their queries clarified.
Sure. Any questions?
Just a moment, sir. They're coming on the chat on YouTube live stream. On how to make open source projects sustainable in the long term.
How to make open source projects sustainable in the long term.
Yes, with the changing technologies and all.
So that's what. So whenever you start developing any code piece, right, always have a framework in mind. So when I say framework, right, giving you an example, like suppose Langchain would have just started with like, okay, I'll write set of Python codes and I'll get with it, and there was no definition of prompt templates, and there was no definition of like functions and all of the coding structure actually makes a lot of importance there, right? So you need to have like that configuration framework, the prompt templates, and all of those kind of things. So that overall framework is very important, even if you start small, right? What I'll say is always have the right coding practices where you can have those functions definition and all of this captured pretty well. The variables which needs to be discussed, like declared, that needs to be there in the like more like a configuration file or something like that. Then some of those different type of language, suppose you are using multiple queries, so that needs to be there in like a different file. So that all of those parts are important. Then other thing is you need to have these well structured, like the code pieces and all should be very well structured in some GitHub or any of those kind of like right way, right? Like I'll say where we are using, and then the way you're deploying those codes, you can make more formalized, but that is long term, but at least have a good structure to your code, like organize your code very nicely and keep a mind of a framework rather than just writing 10 lines of code or 100 lines of code in one single like monolithic way. So that's what I will say. Yeah.
An interesting question out there, sir. How do you see the future of open source AI evolving with the integration of emerging tech like quantum computing?
Okay, I'm not an expert in quantum, by the way. So, but what I have definitely seen is like AI requires a lot of computation power, right? Like, so if you see the amount of GPUs today, what is required is huge, like really huge. So that is where I feel something like a quantum computing will be like a savior for us. Now, again, I'm not sure if someone is going to give us qubits like for free, but definitely if we can get that in some aspect, if we can integrate all of these like the AI models, whatever we are running, if we can have a open source quantum community coming forward and helping us deploy all of these AI models on a quantum computer, that will be awesome. So, and also the nature of programming is going to change, right? With quantum computing coming in, you cannot use classical models the way you have been using it. You'll have to write it differently and all of those kind of aspects. So there's a big area of research. It's an open research which is going on, and recently I think Google also launched Willow, right, which is talking about that particular aspect. So yeah. So quantum AI is going to be huge, but I feel like we should definitely start like means it. We need to have a fusion of both of these communities, technical communities coming together and like solving some real business problems.
All right, so how can beginners effectively navigate large and complex code bases? I think this is an issue most of us have faced.
So what I do again, the way I do it is like by the way, like we have been working on lot on reverse engineering for legacy codes. Okay, so what we do is like we have ChatGPT, right? So for any code which you understand English language, right? And can you help AI itself to summarize the code for you and tell you that what, or just create a chatbot over your code pieces, right? On your GitHub repository, that whatever questions you have, just type and see if it is able to navigate. So we need to be smarter because the way it is written is very difficult. But like with chat gpt and all coming in, like we have been using in our project to reverse engineer a lot of our like legacy codes and all of those things which have been written like 10-15 years back, right? There's a real project which we are doing with clients. So that is one aspect, and that we have been successful so far. So we can actually use gpt or any of these large language models to actually decode.
Another query coming up, sir, is that does India have open job markets for multidisciplinary fields like Cybersec for ML or ML and robotics?
I do think so, because again, I'll tell you, in my team, right? I work in CS. In my team, like majority of people have multidisciplinary skills. Why I say that? So there's a concept of full stack AI engineer. Have you heard that?
Yes, sir. Somewhere I've heard about it.
So what is full stack AI engineer? a person who knows web development as well as who knows AI and who knows backend engineering also. These are three different fields which we talk about, right? Like,
Yes, and who can integrate all of them into one.
yes, and that is one such example. And my team has full of like there are many people who has like multiple different like knowledge on different technologies. They know Kubernetes also, and at the same time they know about large language model and generative AI framework also. So we have both DevOps engineers as well as AI person coming together and creating one role. So definitely there are job markets, and like, but you need to have niche companies for that, right? So wherever you are applying, suppose you are applying for a robotics based company, if you are having like because robotics, one of the major part is artificial intelligence, so you should definitely like, they'll be happy to take, if when you talk about that is, I'm not sure if we'll, but it will be like a cherry on a cake, right, for you, for your resume, that if you have multidisciplinary skills. So but while applying for positions, keep that in mind, like where you're applying, what you're applying, and all of this.
Thank you, sir. Someone has a query on what are some ethical ways to monetize open source projects without restricting access to the code.
Can you come again? Monetize open source projects
Without restricting access to the code.
That's an interesting question. I think the best way we should learn is Amazon, right? Like, or I was telling you an example of database also, right? Where they have written on open source code. So suppose you have a product, let's say, good question, right? Suppose you have created a chatbot or some agent specifically for some, like let's say for farmers, you have created a chatbot. And you are like a product company. There will be a lot of services company which will be using your product to create different solutions on that. And if you contribute, like because you have created a chat, like a use case for farmers and all of those kind of things, if you contribute, suppose you have a LangChain code, within LangChain code you just have a package which where service based companies can use that package to use your product directly, that's a perfect way of monetization, right, if you see that way. But means that is one of the ways, definitely, and that is what like a lot of these enterprise teams have been using and doing. Even Nvidia, you see, right, like they have done that, like I think they have their own specific language, and they have been training folks on that language, and they have made like CUDA is like you can write CUDA programming, right? But for that you need Nvidia GPU. So their product is the main. You have a programming language, like an open source programming language, where which requires only your product. So that's
Oh, that is interesting.
yep.
Another query, sir, a newbie one, is that what common mistakes should new contributors avoid when engaging with an open source project?
Please, please, please. I've told maintain a very good like code, like the way of coding principles, right? 101. I think you would have learned in your software development classes, right? Where you will be talking about like what is the right coding principles and all of those. Please follow that. Judicially follow all of those practices. It will help you in later phases.
A general query coming up, sir, is if you have any tips on how to start startups in tech.
There are a lot. But again, a startup in tech means you can have a tech product, but I'll say go for a business use case. First identify, because like a lot of people, what they common mistake they do is like they just build on the tech thing, but they don't think about business. So you need to think about like, okay, what is the business opportunity there? So even if you're building any startup like in tech, because like see, I'm being associated with IEDC Center, right, like in IIIT Allahabad also. So there like means it's all starts like even all the startups there, I have told them the same thing. We should start with a business problem rather than focusing too much on tech. Your tech can be a like tech will never be an end. It's always a means to end, right? At last you're solving a problem, and that problem is what will like where the tech should help. So that's what, even if it's like a product or tech startup, it should be associated with a business.
All right, thanks, sir. I think that's quite insightful for many startup geeks out here.
Yep. Any more questions?
I think that's it, sir. Thank you very much for taking out time for today's session out of your busy schedule. It was quite a benefit for all of us.
Thank you, and hope it was useful. I was also not very prepared for this, so great. Okay, guys. Hello. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. And for all the other viewers, we have a short video by Shivansh, member of Foswing at Geek Heaven, explaining how to actually contribute in the open source projects at Opencode. Can we have the video, please?
Hello, open source enthusiasts. Today, I'm excited to present a short tutorial on how to register and contribute to OpenCode. First, you have to register at Unstop. After you've done that, join our Discord. This is where you find the link. This is what a Discord looks like. There are several general channels to help you out. Then there are channels for each repo. Let's say you want to contribute to Grepit frontend. This is the announcement channel where mentors will post whenever there's a new issue. Resources channel is for the mentors to post resources which will help you to contribute. Then there is also a discussions channel in which you can talk to the mentor about what you're building or if you're having any issues. After you join Discord, you have to register at events.geekhaven.in. Make sure you have a GitHub first. After you click this button, there will be a small form that you have to fill out. As I've already registered, I can't show you that. This is what the website looks like. There is a leaderboard. This will show the number of PRs merged and your points. You can see any profile. This section will show what their actual contributions are since the event has not started. This is showing 0. After that, you have to go to the GitHub. This is where you'll find the link. GitHub looks like this. There are several repositories that you can contribute to. I've created a test repo just to demonstrate. There'll be a comprehensive readme.md file in every repo. Just follow along and you'll be fine. Let's say I want to contribute to this. So first I'll create a fork. After creating a fork, clone the repo. Go to the terminal or git bash, whatever. Navigate to the folder you want the repo in. Let's open it up in a code editor. I use VS Code. So our repo is finally set up. Let's start picking up issues. There are 3 types of issues in OpenCode. One is open for all, second is competitive, and third is first come first serve. Let's pick up this issue, perform addition. This is a first come first serve issue, which means that you have to be assigned to the issue to start working on it. There is a rule in OpenCode that you can't have more than 3 active issues assigned to you at a time. I comment /claim to let the mentor know. Now she will check out the number of issues that have been assigned to you. If it is less than 3, then you will be assigned the issue. Now I can start working on it. It says create a file in index.js and print the output of addition of 2 numbers. Let's do it quickly. It is always good practice to create a new branch before you contribute. I'll do that and commit. Make sure the commit messages are always meaningful. Okay. My bad. Now I'll push it. Now you have to go to your fork of the repo. it shows that the addition branch had a recent push. Click on the contribute button of the addition branch, open pull request. There is a certain template that you have to follow. So it goes like this: issue colon hashtag and then the issue number. So perform addition hashtag 30. Then you can describe what you have done. Performed addition of 2 and 3. Attaching screenshots help a lot. So let's do that. Also, screenshot of the output would be helpful. The PR has been opened. Make sure you get this approved message from the bot and make sure to follow this template, because if you don't, the points will not be assigned to you. Uh, the mentor will then check this out and quickly merge it. I'll just do that. The PR has been merged and your points will be soon assigned to you, and you can see them.
So thank you everyone for your patience and participation. We expect the same energy from all of you in OpenCode. Thank you.